This video is sponsored by Cel and Clip Studio Paint. Hi, my name is Dong and I'm a Canadian animator based in Japan. I worked on many shows including Yojo Senki, Decadence, Blue Giant, One Piece, Witch Hat Atelier, and I had used Clip Studio Paint in all of those. Clip Studio Paint is the most popular animation software in the Japanese animation industry, and today I want to show you how you too can create amazing animation with it. I will be using the new version 4 of Clip Studio Paint today, and it contains some new features for animators that I will be using. If you don't have Clip Studio Paint, you can go to the Clip Studio Paint website and give the free trial a try. It's fully featured and you can use that to follow this video and see how you like the software. Today we are going to animate this, a short and quick character acting scene. Alright, let's open up the software. Go to File, New, and let's create a new file. Under Project, you want to click on the Animation button. There are a couple of presets here already, and if you select the 1920 by 1080 preset, you should be set for most animation work. Under Timeline, set the frame rate to 24, and you can set the playback time to set the length of our animation. I like to change the playback time display to seconds plus frames, and we can set it at around 3 seconds. We can then hit OK to create the file. Here, the blue frame is our actual animation frame. When we export what is in that frame, and everything outside of it is just extra space essentially. While we can start animating here and now, I personally use what is called a layout template in all of my animation. They look something like this, with the pegos at the top and a frame for our animation. While optional, I find this helped me to organize my drawings, and if you would like to use this, we have to set up our file slightly differently. I'll go through the steps, and I'll put a link in the description for a template file you can use. Okay, let's create a new file again, and you'll need to set the output frame width at 2005 pixels and the height at 1128 pixels. Then at the bottom, set the blank space to 0. Then enable the overflow frame. Change the option to specified size here and change the width to 2334 and the height to 1658. This is the size of a 200 dpi A4 piece of paper essentially. Finally, offset the y-axis by 8 pixels. Hit OK. Then we are going to find our layout template and copy and paste that into our created file. Let's organize it a bit and drag that newly created layer above our paper layer in the layer view on the right and give it a name. Layout template for example. Then we want to open up our timeline and you can find the button at the bottom here. We can also select the paper and layout template in either the layer view or the timeline and lock them. We don't need to touch those layers. And now we have the software set up for animation. Before drawing, I would like to further customize the interface and some of the hotkeys to make using the software easier and more efficient. Again, this is an optional step, and if there is a setup or hotkey that you personally prefer to use, I recommend you do that. First, let's right-click on our timeline and set the thumbnail size to none. I find that the thumbnails take up too much space generally, and since we are still on the timeline, I generally like to color code my layers. By selecting the pre-created animation folder and hitting the button on the top left in our layer view, we can assign it a color. Then, if we click on the timeline option button here, go to Show Palette Color, we can enable Show Palette Color on clips to have it show up in our timeline. For our color selection here, I like to use the Color Set mode, which you can access by clicking on this tab here. The default color set has everything we need for basic animation, and you can always add your own colors. The shortcut for the brush tool is B, but so is the airbrush and decoration tool. If we keep hitting B, it just cycles between them. I personally don't like this interaction, so to turn it off, I will remap some hotkeys. Go to File, Shortcut Settings, select the Tools option under Category, select the airbrush, and hit Delete Shortcut. And do the same for the decoration tool. Then I like to set a shortcut for the Go to Next Cell and Previous Cell function. Under the Menu Commands category, go to Animation and select the Select Previous and Next Cell functions, and add a shortcut for them. I personally use the 1 and 2 key, respectively. I also prefer to use the Control key as a shortcut to rotate my canvas. To set that up, go to File, Modifier Key Settings, and where it says Control, hit the Settings button and set it to Move Rotate, and hit OK. Now, when we hold Control, we can rotate our canvas by clicking and dragging. This works in the same way with holding space and dragging to pan our canvas. And we can also use the mouse wheel or Control plus or Control minus to zoom in and out of our canvas. We also need a shortcut to reset that rotation. So go back to the shortcut settings menu, and under the menu commands, go to View and add a shortcut for the reset rotation function. I like to use Control R. Note that this unbinds the Show Rulers hotkey. People often ask about the brush I use, and while I do think the default brushes are all really good, I do use a custom one as my main pencil brush. If you would like to use the brush that I use, click the Clip Studio button to open the launcher, go to Clip Studio Assets, filter by pens and brushes, and there are a bunch of user-created brushes you can download into the software. I personally use this one. It's called Animate Senyo Ryorufu Enpitsu Shanai no Hito Kanshuban. This was created by user Tiedown. It's an animator's brush created for and by animators. The content ID is here if you want to search it up. Now click Download. Once it is finished downloading, we can enable the asset menu on the right here. Click the folders to open up the asset browser and go to the download folder. Find the file we downloaded and drag it into our brush subtool menu on the left. Alright, we can start drawing now. First, let's take a look at how animation works in Clip Studio Paint. Clip Studio Paint has two types of folders, normal ones and animation folders that you can create by clicking the new animation folder icon here. One is already created by default, and they are the equivalent of animation layers in other software. You can also create normal folders by clicking on the new folder icon here, and we can add a new raster layer into that folder by clicking on the raster layer icon here. Normal folders are incapable of being animated and act like a held drawing. Hit the B button to select our brush, and we can draw something here. You can adjust the brush size and properties in the Property tab at the left. And I set the size to 3 pixels for myself. In an animation folder, each root layer or root folder inside of it acts as an individual animation drawing or cell. So we can draw something like this on the one layer inside the animation folder, hit the new animation cell button here, and this creates a layer named 2, and this will be our 2 cell drawing. We can draw something different on here, and then we can create another cell drawing. And remember that the cells can be either a layer or a folder, and we can drag the 3 layer into the folder icon to put it into a folder. If we make the cell drawing into a folder, we have all the advantages of folders, such as being able to stack multiple layers together. We can also change which drawing is being exposed by right-clicking on the animation folder in the timeline, and we can choose between the 1, 2, or 3 drawing to expose. We can also select the drawings in the timeline and drag them around to change their timing. We can delete drawings in the timeline by right-clicking on them and clicking Delete. If we don't want any drawings exposed, we can click on this box at the top right of our timeline and pull that back to change the exposure. We can also grab and drag this top part to move all the drawings at once. Remember to use the next and previous cell shortcut we created to navigate the timeline. Remember, we put those on the 1 and 2 key. And those are the basics. Let's select our folders in the layer view and delete them by clicking the trash icon, and now we can actually start animating. First, let's create a normal folder and create a raster layer within it. So I personally use raster, but if you prefer vector instead, Clip Studio Paint has great vector features as well. This folder will be our layout or BG layer, and I'll double click on it and rename it as so. With the layer selected in the folder that we created, let's select the figure tool, which lets us draw lines and create a ground plane for our character to move in. Hold the Shift key down to draw a straight line. Then let's create an animation folder and let's name it A, as this will be our A cell. Hit the new animation cell button here. let's drag the one layer that was created inside the animation folder into a normal folder. Then let's give each folder a color to help organize those. Alright, hit B to select our brush and let's start drawing. The E key is the shortcut for the eraser, and I'll be using that quite a lot. Ctrl Z to undo is also a very important shortcut to use. Let's start rough, drawing our characters in our starting neutral pose, starting with the shape for our head and extending the neck and the body from there. The drawing is looking a bit big here, so to scale that down, we can go to Edit, Transform, Scale, Rotate to adjust the size and position of the drawing. The shortcut for Transform is Ctrl T, and we will also be using that quite a lot. And make sure that our character's feet are sitting on that line in our layout. Now with all the limbs in there, we have a rough character drawn out. From here, let's add the details, starting with the face. Let's add a horizontal line for our eyes to rest on, and slowly work up the character from there. Feel free to use your own design for this. I am kind of just making things up as I go. The eyes are generally halfway up the face, and the mouth is halfway between the eyes and chin. I like to have the nose closer to the eyes to make the facial features look cuter. Then let's add the hair. A little short bob would work nice and would be easy to animate. And after that, let's draw her clothing. I think those sailor-style dresses would look cute on her. This is rough animation, so keep those lines quick and loose. We will be cleaning up the animation later. Another useful tool is the lasso tool. With it selected, we can isolate our character's hand, for example, hit Ctrl T to transform it, and shift it around a bit. To me, her arms feel a tad too long here. Here's a quick tip. Go to Edit, Transform, Puppet Warp to use the new Puppet Warp function. Click on our drawing to place some pins. I usually like to put these on our character's joints. And we can click on the pins to move that part of the drawing. This way we can quickly modify our character's pose. Alright, let's finish up the drawing. With our initial pose finished, let's do the final ending pose next. Let's create a new animation cell, and we can turn on our onion skin here to see the previous drawing. We can change the onion skin settings under Animation, Show Animation Cells, Onion Skin Settings. I generally like to lower its opacity to make drawing over it easier. Alright, let's get drawing. I want her to stand on one leg with her left arm up doing the peace sign. Using the first drawing as reference, let's make sure all her volumes are consistent, and let's rough out the pose. Make sure to hit the 1 and 2 keys often to flip between our animation cells whilst drawing. The drawing is a bit too big and her hand is out of frame, so let's select the whole animation folder and hit Ctrl T to use our transform tool to scale down both of our drawings at the same time. And there we go, now she sits in frame. And same thing like before, once we have her rough shape down, let's add the details, starting with the head. Remember to use the onion skin to keep volumes consistent, flip through your drawings often, and make use of the lasso tool combined with the transform function to quickly move and resize parts of the drawing. with that done, next we should get an anticipation pose in there. This is where our character pulls back before shooting up with her arm. It's always important to anticipate your movement in the opposite direction to give it extra impact. Let's drag the A2 drawing to the right a bit to create some space, and between those two drawings, let's create a new cell, and selecting this new cell, the 1A cell, let's turn on the onion skin and draw that anticipation pose. We want her whole body to be slightly crouched down here, including having her legs bent. Let's keep her arms tucked in as she prepares to throw those hands up. And for her expression, let's have her eyes closed here. Alright, let's finish her up. And we're finished. Next, we need a drawing for our character as she overshoots her final pose. This will also give a greater impact to our movement. Let's create a new cell, and looking at the onion skin and flipping between this and the final pose, we want this character to be at a higher position than that final pose. So here the legs and arms would be straighter, and the torso and head would also be at a higher position. So let's draw that out. I also want to keep her hair and dress compressed a bit so that the movement feels less rigid. Alright, let's finish this drawing up. Once our drawing is done, let's flip through them and take a look. I think the movement feels good. Let's also label everything. The first drawing will be A1, the next is A2, then A3, and A4. Then we can rename the drawings in the timeline by going into the animation menu, edit track, rename in timeline order. Then we can add a little spacing diagram. We need that for when we draw our in-betweens. 2 in-betweens between A1 and A2 should be fine, and we'll have one at the halfway point and one at the 3/4 position. One in-between going into A3, which is favoring or being closer to A3, should be fine, and one in-between going into and favoring A4 should also work. Alright, now let's time it out in our timeline. I'll select drawings 2 to 4 and drag them around so that drawing A2 is at frame 13. Then at frame 7, I'll right-click on the timeline and create an in-between track label to mark where I want that in-between. These track labels don't actually do anything, and it's just a planning thing. I'll do the same at frame 10, making that part of the animation on 3s, as each drawing is exposed for 3 frames. Then I'll move A3 to frame 18 and add an in-between label to frame 16. This one will be on 2s to make that movement faster. Then A4 can be moved to frame 24, and that in-between can be placed at frame 21, going back to our animations being on 3s again. We can also trim the scene by taking the timeline marker at the end and dragging that to the left. And if we play it back by hitting the play button, we can visualize our scene much better. Before we can start cleanup, there is a step called tie downs that might be necessary depending on your situation. If your drawing is extremely rough, it can be hard to clean up. And what animators here do is to do a tie down pass, essentially a rough cleanup so that the gap from rough to clean isn't that huge. I always do this in my professional work as I need to send off my animation to be cleaned up by a junior animator, and they will have issues tracing my lines if they are all over the place. But for personal work where you are cleaning up your own animation, you may choose to skip this step if you are confident that you can clean up your own lines. For this video, I would just show you the tie-down process for the A1 drawing to show you guys how it works. Alright, let's lower the opacity of our line work layer in the layer window near the top. Then let's create a new raster layer on top, and using our rough line work layer as reference, let's try and redraw it with a simplified and clean line. Remember that this is still technically part of rough animation, so it's not necessary to be super clean. We just need to make sure the drawing is easier to trace in the actual cleanup. In the tie down, I also like to show the underlying elements, such as the body under the character's dress. I generally mark these with an orange line so that I know not to trace that line in the cleanup, but they will still be useful during in-betweening. We can hide the original rough drawing once this is done. And with that done, next let's add some shading. I'll add a layer under our line work to draw color separation lines, and we can select the red and blue colors in our color set to use as our color separation lines. Note that Clip Studio Paint has two different colors you can set as the active color, and you can click on either one to select and activate them. And I'll load blue as one of our colors and red as the other one. You can also use the keyboard shortcut X to toggle between those two. I'll use the red color to indicate highlights and the areas for the eye whites, for example, and I'll use the blue to draw where the shadows are. Let's keep the rest of the shadows minimalistic for this. Just a little bit on her hair and face, and a little bit scattered around the rest of the body where it makes sense. Next, let's create a new layer under our color separation lines, and let's select some new colors. Maybe a green, and let's use that to color in the hair shadow color. An orange color could work for the skin shadows, a yellow for the highlights, and let's use a light blue for the other shadows. This way we can keep everything color-coded and easy to read. And our character is looking much nicer now. Next, let's do the shading for the rest of our drawings. Nice! Now all our drawings have their shadows and highlights drawn in. Next is the cleanup step. Let's create a new animation folder and let's name it A Clean. We'll give it a color as well. We'll create a new cell and put that in a folder. We can turn off the BG layout layer and the layout template for this, and just use the white paper layer. Let's select our rough animation folder and let's lower the opacity on that. Then we want to select the pen tool and let's use the default G pen to do our cleanup. Let's change some settings first. Make sure that we have the black color selected, reduce the brush size to 2 pixels, turn off the anti-aliasing by clicking on the button on the left, turn off adjust by speed, and open up the brush dynamics option window here and turn off brush pressure and tilt. We want this to be a clean, uniform, mechanical line. And to clean up, we just draw on top of our rough animation. The shortcut for the pen tool is the P key. If you're having difficulties drawing a clean, smooth line, I recommend using the curve tool. Click on the figure tool, select the curve subtool, and change the brush size to 2 and turn off the anti-aliasing. Click and hold at the center point, move the cursor to the ending point, release, adjust the curvature by moving the cursor, and then click once more to finalize the line. This can be a much quicker way to clean up longer lines. The shortcut for the figure tool is U. We need to use an alias line when cleaning up, as this will help with the cel painting process and will be useful during compositing as well. Alright, let's clean up the rest of the drawing, alternating between using the pen and line tool. Note that when we use our eraser, make sure to turn off the eraser's anti-aliasing as well. When you are finished, remember to label the drawing, A1 in this case. With the black line work done, let's clean up the color separation line as well. We'll create a new layer underneath our black line, and using the same principle, let's trace over the blue and red lines. And with that complete, let's repeat this process for the rest of the drawings. Note that in cleanup, we need to renumber our drawings. The rough A2 drawing becomes A4 after cleaning it up, as those two in-between drawings will become the new A2 and A3 drawings respectively. Alright, let's keep going. Cool, now our drawings are clean. Let's draw the in-betweens next. Let's draw the in-between for A2, which is at the halfway point between A1 and A4. Remember, we rename drawings between the rough and clean animation steps. We'll create a new animation cell, and let's turn on the onion skin, and using the pen and curve tool, let's draw that halfway intermediate drawing. Make sure to flip often and that the line we draw is at the middle of the drawing to the left and to the right of it. And here for the eyes, they will also be in a halfway closed position. Alright, let's finish the rest. For the hands, they move quite a lot, so you will often have to guess at what kind of pose they will be in. As you gain more experience in in-betweening, you will get a greater grasp of drawing things like this. And let's draw the color separation line in as well in another layer. Let's draw the next in between. This one will be halfway between the drawing we just drew and A4. So same principle, turn on the onion skin and draw those lines in the middle between our two onion skin lines. And let's keep her eyes closed here. Take your time and make sure that there are no gaps and to keep those lines closed. And with that done, let's keep going. For the next in-between, if we check the spacing chart on our roughs, this one favors the ending drawing, meaning it will be closer in spacing to it. Alright, let's turn on the onion skin, but this time let's draw that line at the 1/3 position, closer to the green onion skin line. And same thing with the hand and fingers, we'll keep all the lines favoring the A6 ending pose. Next, moving on to the last in-between drawing, same concept with the previous drawing, we need to favor the ending pose here. Let's turn on our onion skin and make sure that our lines are closer to the green onion skin lines. And once we're done with our line work, playing it back, we can see she moves pretty smoothly. Let's fix up the drawing naming in our timeline, so let's go to Animation, Edit Track, and rename in timeline order. And now everything is properly named. We can start Cel Painting now. Let's select the Clean Animation folder and right-click, Duplicate. Let's give it a new color, and we can double-click on it to rename it something like A Color. We can hide the old A Clean folder. Then we need to create the color palette for our character. Let's click on this Edit Color Set button in our Color Set view, and we can create a new set of colors. Let's give it a name. Then all we do is double-click on our selected color to open up the color picker, pick the color we want, and here let's do her skin color first, select it and hit OK. Then right-click on an empty square in our color set and hit Replace Color. Next, we also need a shadow color for the skin tones, so let's select that and replace the color set next to our normal skin tone. Moving on, we need a color for her hair, the hair shadow, and the hair highlights. And let's repeat this process for all the colors that we need. Here's the set for the eye whites, eye white shadow, eye highlight. One for the pupil, pupil shadow, pupil highlight. One for the dress and dress shadow. One for the white area of the dress, a set for her scarf, and a set for her shoe and shoe shadow color. Let's create a new layer for painting under the black line work layer, but above the color separation layer. To paint in our drawing, we use the Fill tool. Click on it or use the hotkey G, and under the subtool, let's make sure that we have Refer Other Layers selected. In the settings, we want to disable Close Gap, set the tolerance to 0, turn off area scaling, and at the bottom, let's turn off anti-aliasing. Then we can grab our skin tone color and fill in the areas that should be skin. To paint in the skin shadow color, let's select the color separation line layer, turn on Set as Draft layer, and select our paint layer again. If you open up the Refer Multiple option for our Fill tool, you can see that it is set to exclude draft layers, meaning we can fill in the shadow color and paint over the blue color separation lines at the same time. Now we just do this for the other colors. To paint in the hair, let's disable the draft layer option on our color separation line layer and paint in the main hair color on our color layer. And when we need to paint in the shadows and highlights, we can turn on the draft layer option. To check for areas that you might have missed in painting, you can turn off the white paper layer. This gives us a checkerboard pattern for areas that haven't been painted in. For things with a lot of detail, like the eyes, you might want to manually paint in the color separation lines, and also use the pen tool when needed to get the areas where the color separation lines intersect working. And that's about the gist of it, and now we just need to paint in the rest of the drawing. And that's our first drawing down, 7 more to go. If you're having issues painting using the Fill tool, make sure to check that your line work is closed and without any gaps. And with that done, we can play back our animation. And yeah, it looks nice. Let's export it. For me personally, I generally would take this animation and I would continue to do compositing on another software. To do this, we can go to File, Export Animation, Export Animation Cells, and we can set the folder to where it exports to. And for the file name format, I would select Animation Folder Name plus Number and set the file format to Targa, as it is what is used in the industry. We can also set the export range to the entire canvas. Hit OK, and every drawing gets exported into their own image Targa file. Check out my video on animate compositing to see how to take this further. Alternatively, we can export an image sequence, which some people prefer to use. Under Export Animation, select Image Sequence. We can change the export location, we can change the prefix name, and we can set the starting number. I generally prefer this to start at 1 instead of 0, and we can change the file type to PNG, which is pretty popular to use. For the size settings, again, we can either export the entire canvas, which will help with compositing, or you can just export the blue animation frame. Hit OK, and it exports an image sequence. We can then take this into our favorite compositing software. The advantage of an image sequence over exporting animation cells is that it is already timed out. If you don't want to do any compositing and just want to finish in Clip Studio Paint, we need to smooth out our alias line first. To do that, let's duplicate the A color animation folder, and we can give it a different color and rename it A Smooth. To smooth our drawing, select the drawing folder, 1 in this case, right-click and hit Merge Selected Layers, then go to Filter, Blur, Smoothing. We need to do this for all of our drawings, and to make this easier, we can record an Auto Action macro. Find the Auto Action tab and drag it out to make it easier to use. Hit the button at the bottom to create a new Auto Action set, and let's rename it Smoothing. Hit the red Record button, and let's repeat what we did. Select the To folder, merge it, smooth it, then hit the shortcut we used for selecting the next animation cell, which we set to the To key earlier. Hit the Stop button, and then hit the Play button to play out our macro until all of our drawings are smooth. Then go to File, Export Animation, and select Movie. Find a place to save it and give it a name. Hit Save, and we have the options for scaling and the frame rate. Here, Clip Studio Paint automatically scales our animation to 1920 by 1080, and we can leave it as is. Hit OK, and this creates a lightweight MP4 file you can play back. And we're done. Our animation looks pretty nice, I think. There's a sense of weight in her movement, and the way she moves just feels right. And that concludes this video. I hope you all learned something. If I missed something or if you have questions, please leave a comment. This channel is supported by my Patreon and YouTube members, and thank you guys. Without you, I wouldn't have been able to make these videos possible. If you'd like to support the channel, links are down below. Supporters get extra content every month, including extra videos and behind-the-scenes look into my professional work. Other than that, check out my socials, and I'll see you next time.